How's it going, Eliminators? Today we're going to be replacing the paddles and the scraper bar on a single stage MTD snowblower. So with that being said, let's get right into it. So in the shop today, I have this MTD made Boland's 21-inch single stage snowblower here that I ended up picking up from one of my customers for free. The engine here runs. It is a 208cc Powermore engine. They are manufactured exclusively for MTD, and it's gotten an oil change, so it does have some fresh oil. The recoil rope was broken, so we ended up replacing that with some STENS True Blue line there. So this thing fires up and runs. Now, unlike a two-stage snowblower that has the first stage auger and second stage impeller that throws the snow up and out the chute, a single stage snowblower only has one rotor, or auger as they're commonly referred to. Now, similar to a two-stage snowblower, the auger's spirals pull snow from the outside in towards the center as they rotate forwards. These spirals here are made of rubber, and as you can see, they do wear over time, which means they will need to be replaced eventually, as will the center paddle, and that is what acts as your impeller. This piece of rubber here throws the snow up the chute and out wherever you aim it. Now, unlike a two-stage snowblower that for the most part will always throw the same amount of snow, how well a single stage snowblower works and how far the snowblower throws the snow all depends on the condition of the spirals and the center paddles. As material wears away from these spirals here, you'll notice that the distance in between the auger housing and the spiral itself starts to increase. Just like those spirals, the distance in between the auger housing and the paddle starts to wear, so that gap increases. Thus, you have less snow being thrown up the chute of the snowblower. Now, if left too long, you'll end up with something like this. As you guys can see here, the person who owned this before me allowed this to get ground down to metal. So these spirals and paddle, or the paddle kit as they're referred to, probably needed to be replaced a year or two ago, and this individual just let them wear right down. Luckily, the areas where these bolt to are not worn down, so we should be able to save this unit. Like I said, it's already got some new parts in it. Now, on almost every single stage snowblower out there, they're going to have replaceable paddles, and in order to do that, you're going to have to first remove the old ones. Now, there's going to be usually about 3 different styles of how they are mounted to the actual rotor or auger. In this case, you can see that we have a bolt head here, and if we go to the other side, you guys can see that these are basically just self-tapping screws. So this is probably going to be the easiest of the 3 designs. All you have to do is get a 3/8 socket, and we can simply back those off to remove the paddles and the spirals. Now, the second design is going to be something like a bolt. You may have a carriage bolt on one side with a nut, or you may have a bolt with a nut on either side, and they're going to use that type of fastener to hold the rubber onto the actual metal auger itself. Now, the third design is going to be rivets, where you have a hole that's drilled through the rubber and the metal auger, and then they secure that in place using a rivet. In that case, you are going to have to use probably like an 1/8 inch drill bit to drill out the center of the rivet. That way you can remove the old paddle, install the new one, and if you'd like, you can re-rivet them onto the auger, or you can simply install something like self-tapping bolts or a bolt and a nut, and you'll be able to make that decision when you're ready for reassembly. Now, apart from the rubber paddle set, you are also going to have a scraper bar on these single stage snowblowers here. And on this particular one, and on many of these single stage snowblowers, it is going to be made out of plastic. So it will wear quicker than a metal scraper bar would on a 2-stage snowblower. These scraper bars are held in place by carriage bolts with a nut on the bottom, and you guys can see on this one there are 4. And before we can replace any of that, we're going to have to figure out what parts we need. To do that, we're going to look at the model number on the back of this snowblower. So on the majority of single stage snowblowers, you are either going to look for a plaque or a sticker somewhere down here. On a lot of the Toros, they're going to have them back here. On this particular MTD, it is in the bottom right corner, you guys can see there, the model number is a 31AS2P5C565. That model number there will allow us to get an illustrated parts listing for any part that we need for the snowblower. But if you need a specific part for the engine, you can find the model number for the engine down on the engine block itself. In this case, it's a Powermore 270-SU. So over here on the workbench, I do have a paddle kit and a scraper bar. These are both from STENS. However, I did want to include that MTD did release a supplement sheet back in 2004 for their 21-inch single-stage snowblowers. Basically what it says is, due to a supply issue, these snowblowers can have 2 different augers depending on what they had in stock at the time. However, they both take a different style paddle kit. So I can show you guys how to determine which one you have and which part you'll need. So the old school or original style auger that they used had a metal support in behind the rubber spirals here and had a completely open center. So there was no plate here with this oval that you see in front of us now. The part number for that particular 21-inch auger is going to be a 784-5485, and it is now superseded by this auger here. However, if you have the original auger and it's not damaged in any way and you just need the paddle kit for that, then the replacement paddle kit part number is going to be a 753-0613. That is going to be the OEM MTD number, or if you want the aftermarket STENS paddle kit, you can purchase the 780-027. Now, as I said, MTD did come out with that supplement sheet, so they ended up starting manufacturing the auger that you see in front of us here today, and that is going to be the 684-04027A, and this auger here is what supersedes that old school auger. They no longer make those and they're not available anymore. And this newer style auger does not have any metal support in behind the rubber spirals, and it has this metal plate here with this oval. Now, if you do have that newer style auger, you are going to need an MTD 735-04472 paddle kit or a STENS 780-035. As you can see, that's what we got there. And as for the scraper bar, it's going to be the same regardless of what auger assembly your snowblower has. And that is going to be a 731-1033 or a STENS 780-110. Now, before you go ahead and order a new scraper bar, I just wanted to mention that these are going to be reversible. So you can unbolt these and simply spin them around to get yourself a nice new cutting edge on there, and you won't have to spend the money on a replacement part. As you guys can see on this particular one, the front side is quite worn once again because they are plastic. However, the back side is still nice and sharp because obviously it hasn't been used. However, because I got this snowblower for free, I decided I will put a little bit of money into this thing to freshen it up so that I can sell it as a quality used snowblower. And to remove the scraper bar, I'm going to be using a 7/16 socket on my Milwaukee Impact. Now, the scraper bar is going to be the first thing we're going to remove. So this scraper bar here is technically still good. I can put this in my used parts inventory, and selling for 50% of my list cost will usually pay for the new one that I installed, so I'll be making a little bit of money back, but it will prevent me from having to order a new one and having it in stock. I can give my customer a choice. I have a used one that I can sell you 50% off, get it out today, or I got to order a new one, wait a few days for it to come in, and you're paying twice as much. Now, before we install the new scraper bar, you are going to notice that they do have slots cut into them, and that gives you adjustment on the position of where you want your scraper bar to be set. Now, keep in mind that this old one here was installed like this with the fresh edge towards the back, and as we can see here, the wear marks for where that lock nut was installed is at the very front, which means this scraper bar was pushed as far back as it can go. Keep in mind that the scraper bar is installed on an angle like this, so it does scrape the ground like that. So as this scraper bar wears, by having the bolts right at the front, that means that we can just loosen up all of the 4 nuts, and then as that scraper bar wears, you can just move it forward ever so slightly to give yourself a nice fresh cutting edge. So line up at least one hole, and we can start to just put the carriage bolts through loosely, just to start threading the nuts on. Again, making sure to push that all the way back. Now, once we get the new paddle kit installed, we'll come back to the scraper bar here to properly set the depth. Now, depending on what type of driveway you have, whether it's an uneven asphalt or a nice flat concrete driveway, you may want to set this shave plate to be lower or higher, and we'll talk about that later on in the video. From what I've seen on the majority of single stage snowblowers that I've worked on, the scraper bars tend to wear quite evenly because on single stage snowblowers, you'll notice that they don't have skid shoes that are adjustable, and they also usually don't have air pressurized tires, which means the tires will never get bigger or smaller on either side of the snowblower, and the skid shoes won't become out of adjustment or wear unevenly. So those scraper bars generally wear nice and even. All you have to do is when you do want to make an adjustment, just make sure you're pulling it forward the same amount on either side. Next up, we can start removing the rubber on the actual auger itself. To do that, we are going to be using a 3/8 socket there. And what I want to tell you guys is don't take them off all at once and then try to put them back together. What we're going to do is quite simple. We're going to pull one of the spirals off and we're going to install a spiral. We're going to spin this around, remove another spiral, install another spiral. You want to do the spirals first and then always do these paddles last, because what I find is you see how the spiral fits almost snug underneath the paddle here. Well, the new one might be slightly longer. So what I like to do is have the spirals already done. That way we can pull off the old worn paddle and then install the new one. And if it's a little wider, we don't have to worry about having that bigger one installed first and then having to try to jam the spiral in there after. Now, from what I've seen in the past, these rubber paddle kits, especially the aftermarket ones, don't come cut exactly like an OEM one would. So you are going to have to manipulate it to get it in there. But just to show you guys how much more rubber we're talking about, it is absolutely insane the amount of difference that this new paddle kit is going to make. Spin that around. We'll get the ones on the bottom. I'm going to have to get that spiral up underneath the paddle, and I'm just going to put one in, and we're not even going to tighten it up all the way, just enough to hold that thing into position so that I can roll this around and try to start on the other one here. Thread it in by hand, get it lined up to the hole, and just tighten that up. So I'll get the rest of these screws put in. Not tightening them down too much. We also don't want to deform the metal or strip the threads, so definitely don't over tighten these. And because they're only going into rubber, they don't have metal backstops to prevent the bolt from over tightening and deforming the rubber. So you want to get them tight, but you don't want to get them too tight to the point where they start to really squish the rubber too much. There is no torque spec that I use. I'm kind of just tightening them up to the point where I feel comfortable with them. So once again, old spiral, not even close to the housing. Just to show you guys, I can stick my finger through there. Compared to the new one, try to zoom in here, and we're actually scraping against the housing here. That's how tight that is, to the point where you can hear it. And that's good, that's what we want. So it's going to be scraping all of that snow off of the inside of the auger housing. So we'll rotate this thing around. It's getting harder to turn now. And we will remove the other ones. Super simple repair, guys. You can do this with hand tools. You don't need any special tools to replace these. Get another one in. You guys can see just how simple this is. So the left half of the snowblower is already replaced. What I'll do is repeat the steps off camera for the right side, and then I'll bring you guys back to replace the center paddles. Now, if you guys were curious as to just how much I'm tightening these down, I am using the impact on the number 1 setting here, and I'm just going to tighten these up to the point where I get a little bit of squish in the rubber. just about that much. All right, so with the spirals now replaced, I'm going to remove the center paddle here. Now, keep in mind this individual did let these wear down to the point where the metal started to grind down. So I think I'm going to just take a file to that and get rid of some of those sharp edges. You know, we're really lucky that this didn't grind further down to the point where the bolts or the screws go in. If that would have happened, I would have had to purchase a whole new auger assembly. Repeat the same steps for the other side. One of the reasons why you want to keep an eye on your equipment, guys, and always perform the necessary preventative maintenance before it gets to that point. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to take that burr off. Okay, now that I got some bare metal there, I think I'm just going to hit this with a little bit of black paint. You guys might be surprised how far a little bit of black paint will go, or any kind of paint, on any of your used equipment that you're selling. It really makes it look new, gives it a nice little shine, makes it look presentable, and it makes it look like you've actually taken care of your equipment, unlike the person who owned this one. So I'll let that get a little dry, but I can already tell, just with those spirals replaced, that it is already getting, hear that, squeaking? Now that's going to wear away the first time you engage the augers. This rubber obviously is going to wear over time. So the first time you engage this auger, you may notice a little bit of vibration, a little bit of noise like squeaking or rubbing, and that'll eventually go away. As we can see, this side turns nice and smooth, but once we get up to this side here, right there, it just grabs a little bit. Alright, so check out the difference between these two pieces. Also, I just wanted to point out there is no top or bottom, so it doesn't really matter, you know, which way you install these. The holes are going to line up the same either way. Once again, I'm just starting these by hand, makes it a little bit easier to line up. So if I line up the edge on the old one, you guys can see the older ones were a little bit wider, maybe 1/8 of an inch, so maybe a 1/16 on either side. Now you guys can see that these ones fit almost perfectly. Like, I didn't have to do any bending of the corners, and I gotta be honest, I have in the past on some of the aftermarket kits had to trim the sides, because if these paddles are too long, like I said, those corners start to curve up and fold over your spiral, and that's not ideal. You want them as flat as possible. So I would highly recommend this STENS kit. Everything's gone together quite nicely. Same thing for the other side. Start your screws, lay that in there, line up the holes, and then tighten up your screws. Now it might be hard to see just how much of a gap we have in between that new rubber paddle and the auger housing, but if I bring you up into the discharge chute and we zoom in, you guys can see there is hardly any space in there. So like I said, paddle kit replacement, this thing's going to throw snow like it was new again. It's a very simple repair, but maybe more time consuming if you have rivets instead of screws or bolts. Also, I just wanted to point something out that MTD did that I don't really agree with. So going back up to the top here, you guys can see Bolin's Premium 21-inch, 208cc. You think you're getting a 21-inch snowblower. However, it's not actually the case. If we look at the auger housing design over here, you guys can see that this side comes to a nice, clean 90-degree angle. But if we come over to this side, you can see that it almost looks like this is bent. However, that is by design. And it's a cheeky little design that MTD did, which again, I don't agree with. and I'm going to show you why. I never thought that I'd have to go snowblower shopping and bring a tape measure, but that's exactly what I have in front of me here today. And I'm going to pick this thing up, and we're going to go to the corner of the auger housing over here, so there's absolutely no trickery. And I'm going to try to get this in one shot as I bring the camera over, and then we zoom in. That auger housing is exactly 20 inches. But look what happens when we bring this tape measure down ever so slightly. You get your 21 inches. What an absolute ripoff from MTD, because for the most part, this is a 20-inch auger housing. I mean, check that out. Top to bottom, for the most part, is 20 inches, except this one little area that is only, what, maybe 3 inches? That, in my opinion, guys, should be false advertising. And that little trick there will significantly alter the test results when an independent third-party company is doing testing on a new line of products, because if this is sold as a 21-inch snowblower, they have to pair it with other 21-inch snowblowers. However, because the auger housing is only 21 inches for that small little 3-inch area, this would technically outperform any other actual 21-inch single-stage snowblower that had the same 208cc engine. So this thing would go straight to the top of the charts, all because of a cheeky little design. And if we take the same tape measure to the actual auger itself, just so you guys can see what we're looking at here, you get about 18, maybe 18 and a half at the max. So again, 18 and a half inch auger, 20-inch auger housing, and 21 inches at that little triangle there. This particular snowblower, in my professional opinion, is by all intents and purposes a 20-inch single-stage snowblower. Also, my customer was nice enough to give me the original owner's manual for both the snowblower and the engine. So it's always nice when I sell a quality used piece of equipment. It makes it look like it's been a one-owner machine, which is always nice for resale. They don't have a full IPL here, but they do have this little replacement parts chart, and it does give you the part numbers for the shave plate, commonly referred to as scraper bar, as well as the belt, and that is going to be for the 2P5 model or the 2N1 models. If you have the 2M1 model, you are going to need that belt number right there. And then here's all the information for the paddle kits as well. Again, I showed you guys how to identify which auger assembly you have so you know which paddle kit you need. And then as for the spark plug, that is an RN9YC, and this engine takes 20 ounces of 5W30 oil. Next up, we are going to be adjusting the position of the shave plate to set its depth. Now, there's one of two ways that you can do this. There is going to be a way that MTD and Cub Cadet recommends, and then there's going to be another way that you can do if you have an uneven driveway surface. Now you're going to notice that I have a paint stick here, and that is what I normally use to set the height of the skid shoes on a two-stage snowblower. So what you would do is you would take this paint stick and you would put it underneath the scraper bar or the shave plate, usually across the center. And then what you do is come to your skid plates, loosen them off, and lower them all the way down to a level surface, and then tighten them up. That way you're setting the gap in between your metal shave plate on a two-stage snowblower and the ground so that you're not putting unnecessary wear on your shave plate. What I want to show you guys here is there is going to be a difference in height depending on how your auger is positioned. For example, if your auger is set with the paddle down, you're going to have more than a paint stick worth of clearance. However, if we rotate the auger forwards, you guys are going to notice that it now sits on the spirals. And because there are no metal supports on these spirals here, these tend to bend up and warp up a little bit, which then causes the auger housing to come down a little bit. And you're going to notice that now there is not even any room in between the shave plate and the ground. Now I'm going to put a diagram up on screen so that you guys can see what Cub Cadet, which is owned by MTD, recommends. They say that you are supposed to have the auger, the shave plate, and the wheels all set to the same level position. However, as you'll notice in the diagram, they don't really show you which position the auger is set. As we've just demonstrated here, it all depends on where the center paddle is, whether it's in the vertical position or slightly forward, and that's going to change the position of the auger housing. Obviously, if you set the shave plate to a lower position, you will be wearing your shave plate out quicker than you would your paddle kit. However, the shave plate is significantly cheaper than a new paddle kit, so that's what I would recommend. And I personally have a concrete driveway and prefer a nice clean cut. And having the scraper bar set to the lowest position will ensure that no snow goes underneath it and is left behind. So loosen off the lock nuts on those carriage bolts just to the point where we can move that shave plate to make our adjustment. Rotate your auger to the point where it sets the auger housing at the highest position, and then coming down to your shave plate, simply just pull it down to the lowest point. At that point, you can take a little paint marker or just a permanent marker if you want and mark the shave plate, because it's going to be next to impossible to tighten those lock nuts underneath the carriage bolts with the snowblower in this position. I find that you don't have to mark both sides. As long as you have one side marked, you can tighten up that side. The other side, you are still going to be able to adjust and pivot basically off of this bolt there. And then all you have to do is set the other side to the same position. If you wanted to make it accurate as possible, you could measure the distance here and then just set the other side to the same distance. Whichever way you measure, once you're happy with the position, go ahead and tighten that up. If we look at where we're set now, you guys can see that we're about at the halfway point. So there is still plenty of room for adjustment. As that shave plate wears down, we can always move this forward as needed. All right, so I'm almost ready to take this snowblower outside and fire it up to engage the auger, make sure that everything is functioning properly. But before that, I'm going to be filling this thing up with some Gulf Pro Fuels alkylate 4-stroke fuel. This stuff is great for putting into any kind of equipment that you're going to be storing for a long period of time. So we're going to be filling this up with approximately 1 liter of fuel, and then I'm going to be starting this up and letting it run. And this fuel is good for up to 2 years, which means I can store this snowblower and not have to worry about the carburetor gumming up. And one thing you guys want to look out for when filling up any type of small engine equipment is if the fuel tank has one of these little pieces of plastic in there, or if it has the screen. You guys only want to fill the tank up to the bottom of that plastic insert there. As you guys can see, this one says fuel level. You want to allow some room inside of that plastic fuel tank for expansion of the fuel and the gases. And not filling it any higher than that specified level will just help prevent your fuel tank from cracking. There probably will be some squeaking or rubbing, maybe even a little bit of vibration, but once those rubber paddles wear themselves in, I shouldn't hear that anymore. All right, we'll give this thing a couple primes, see if we can get it fired up. Shouldn't need the choke. Well, that's going to wrap up today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed that one. If you did, think about leaving me a thumbs up. You know, it really helps me out. You can click here to subscribe and click over here to watch one of my previous videos. I upload every single week, so be sure to stop on by next week. Check channel out for new content. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.